I've always wanted a pit bike. I'm a big guy, and I've ridden a few, friends of mine and such, and comfort level wasn't there. I tend to compress suspension quite a bit, and sometimes power is an issue, but really with a pit bike, you're not trying to scream. If you are, just go buy a bigger bike with more power. So I also like to be, I guess, unique or creative. So what I did is I went and found, in my eyes, what was kind of a pit bike when I was a kid. It was an older bike, had like dirt bike tires, dirt bike exhaust, lightweight, easy to load and unload on a trailer, and you could go have some fun on the trail on it. I did that, and it's great. I love it, I really do, but it's still a little too small for me. The pit bike thing, I know, it's supposed to be small, but then you normally see small people on it. When you see a really big guy on a small bike, it's not comfortable to look at, okay? So I did the next thing, and you're gonna see what it is here. To continue, this is the pit bike I built, and I love it. It is a 1971 Honda CL70, and a friend of my brother's had this in a barn. You always hear about those stories. I found that barn. This guy had so many motorcycles, my brain was on fire. I kept yelling out what it was, what year it was, and all that, and me and the guy had a great conversation. Super nice guy. Not allowed to disclose his location. He's very private, but after this deal, and after I sent him pictures of this, he said, anytime you want to come by one of my projects, feel free. So that was awful nice. Anyway, shout out to him, without shouting out to him, for selling me this gem. So the engine on it was pretty bad. I didn't want to spend the time or the money in getting a 70cc engine to move this guy. So with my investment in this, which was minor because it's such a cool old bike that it was a little bit more than like a pit bike roller would have been, but I considered this a roller because it was a 70cc. So what I did is I bought an Amazon 140cc, put it on here, put an oil cooler on it, got almost everything else working. She's a kickstart only. It is a clutch. I put some fresh knobbies on it, cheapos, and some fresh shocks straight out of Amazon. I couldn't believe how cheap they were. They were pretty amazing. Put a seat on it that looks good, but not necessarily all that comfortable. And I rode the snot out of it. Had a lot of fun out at Busco with some friends, and both they and I were surprised with what it could do. So anyway, I had a lot of fun, but I got off at the end of the day, and I was sore. And not just, you know, bouncing around sore. It was because of my riding position. The bike's just a little too short for me. Cool for cruising around the neighborhood, go splash in a mud puddle once in a while, but for a day out riding out at Busco, if you've ever been out there, or any ATV, off-road, trail, whatever, you're gonna want a little more suspension, especially if you're a bigger fellow like me. Anyway, so I did that. I built a much bigger pit bike. Right behind this one. A lot of you know exactly what this bike was. Some of you are gonna hate me for what I did to it, and that's okay. It had served a very purposeful life. It was wore out. The engine was blown up, and the guy wanted way too much for the engine. But he sold me the roller for this 2006 Honda CRF450R for really, really cheap. I'm not sure why he did it. Maybe he felt sorry for me, who knows. But as you can see, I went in and I changed out the power plant to the same engine that's in that, what I call a pit bike, my CL70. Now you might ask, why'd you do that? I just explained. I needed more suspension. I needed a better riding position. If I'm gonna go out and pound around with my friends on their mini bikes, in their go-karts, all that kind of stuff. Now, yeah, could I go out and spend, you know, 3,500 bucks and pick up a running CRF450R? Yes, I can, but that's not my thing. And kickstarting a 450 is never very fun. I have a 600, and that's no fun to kickstart. This thing, kickstarting it, is pretty easy once you get her tuned in. Still working on that. But I took it out to Busco yesterday, and I'll tell you what, it's everything I needed it to be. Now, the seat is hard as rock. Don't know how you guys do it. I'm heavier, so yeah, my ass has to deal with a lot more. But this engine did just fine. The tires are completely bald, and she still tracked very well in the soft sand. I was shocked. Maybe it's just because of the makeup of the bike. It could be the suspension. It could be where my weight is on the bike. But holy cow, it did so well. 38. So I bought a, I have to do some re-gearing. The front sprocket is a little too small. So first gear is 100% useless. Third gear is my favorite. I'd rather second gear be my favorite and first gear be, you know, have a little bit of tug to it. Top end currently is only about 30 miles an hour, and I'd like to stretch that up to 14 tooth front. I bought a 16 and a 17. They're on their way. I'm certainly going to upgrade that stuff. It seems to have enough power, but when I get those new sprockets, she might need a little more at top end, or to get to top end, I should say, in fourth gear. So we will eventually change out this carburetor, which is a PZ17, to some kind of 24 millimeter, just to give it a little more breathing room. The exhaust is right off a normal pit bike. I'll show you that in a minute. And it is a straight through exhaust. It's just breathing, so I certainly could send some more carburetor through it. The rest of it, I had to put a different chain on it and a different rear sprocket. I went with a 428. The rear sprocket is a 60 tooth because that's the only one that came in this particular rim's bolt pattern. The other side, so over here, as you can see, it's just a pit bike exhaust. Pretty standard, running a little lean. You can see she's purple. And that's all right. That's probably because this exhaust is so wide open that I'm just not throwing enough fuel at it with that stock carb, and I'll work on that. Back here, I just ran a bolt. I'll eventually make a spacer for that and get that in place a little better. But for now, that actually fits pretty good. Doesn't get in the way of my leg when I'm sitting. When I stand up, it's in a little bit of a bad spot, but it's not terrible. Up here in the controls, a lot of the controls were toast. It was an original Breakmaster, and it was no good. I bought a new one. These are very affordable, almost anywhere you go. But again, I always shop Amazon, which I know we all hate Amazon together, but at the same time, it's a nice way to get stuff pretty cheap. So I don't know, that was like 13 bucks, 15 bucks. I got a new shiny throttle assembly. I've never had one of these with this funny little pulley in it. I figured it fit the bike pretty good. It was only a few extra bucks, so I did that. I did some new grips. What else? The plastics look pretty nice because I found a guy on Marketplace that was selling some plastics for pretty cheap. I went out there, he sold me the tank, the front fender, number plate, this, whatever you call this guy, and the two rears. The reason I don't have that rear on there is because the exhaust gets in the way and I got to figure something out, either bump the plastic out or something along those lines. Controls. Okay, there were a couple of things I had to contend with here. So as you can see, I'm nice and tight in there with the engine backed up to the, I guess you'd call it the swing arm bolt. So that's backed up into the swing arm bolt. So now my shift lever, instead of it being here where you'd want it, where you want the start of it, and then the lever actually being about out here, it was way forward, about, like, I want to say it's almost 4 inches forward. So I had a couple of choices. I could get fancy and do some kind of a linkage, or I could just cut a little bit out of the shifter itself. So far it's worked pretty good. It still has to be shortened a little bit, so I'm thinking another inch off of there, and that'll be a total of 4 inches cut out of it, which was my original, but I didn't want to go that far. But it still seems to shift fine. My foot gets under it fine. It is a little tough finding neutral because it's so touchy, because with a shorter arm there's a shorter distance that you're able to locate it. But beyond that, the shifter has worked out okay. I have really big feet, so that distance that you see, yeah, size 13 boot is able to shift that. On the other side, this is where things got a little rough and dicey. And I've had to deal with this in the past on other bikes, but This is my first dirt bike, trying to get this kickstart. You can see it's here, and I had to come down and around and over and up and under and connect into there. So I had to do that. If any of you have ever done anything like this, this is the kickstart. If it's up here, it kicks down and it'll hit the foot peg. No bueno. So I decided to go around. So at first I just kind of mocked up a very light, lightly welded kind of junk metal that I've had around. And even on test kicks, it immediately just bent, which I knew it was coming. But even after then reinforcing it a couple of times, it kept bending and kept bending. So I've had to reinforce on the back side and on the front side of this. This here, I still have to do a little more reinforcement. I have to straighten it because you can see it's a little bent, it's a little out. So I'm going to reinforce that again with something here. Maybe I'll machine a piece of steel and weld it in. Then up here, obviously we're back to the stock starter. This part hasn't bent, that part's fine. But the rest of it was pretty darn flimsy and tough to get rigid. So unless you're a welder, you might have to come up with something else. Now, obviously, you can have an electric start, and there's plenty of room underneath this seat to mount some kind of a battery tray or something. And, I could have done that, but I still wanted to keep it kind of, call it legit, or whatever you want to call it. So I wanted it to be a kickstart. Don't ask me why. Then everything else, man, just kind of bolted up into place. The coil bolted up into here. I'm going to get me a pull choke, or if I get the new carb, I'm going to look at the carbs. If the new carb just has a flip one, I don't have to worry about it. But if the new carb has a cable actuated choke, I will mount one up there, and that'll be handy. The fuel petcock, I just mounted to this front mount. I don't even know it was mounted there before, but just mounted that. Got a fuel filter in line, and then it goes into another petcock on the carburetor, which is annoying, but those small vehicles, they have lack of space, so they do that sometimes. I had to cut the frame, and that's where the purists are gonna get mad at me. Why'd you cut a perfectly good CRF450? Well, because I wanted to, and because it was affordable. And then some guys are also gonna ask, why did I leave all this if I cut it off here? Well, I'm eventually gonna mount some stuff in here. We'll see what that is and call it a future episode, or maybe on an Instagram reel or whatever. I have some ideas, some stuff that I'm going to do with this. The brakes work great. I have to get front brake pads. The rear brakes, okay, they don't work great. They're rear brakes, and it's all Chinese. So I got to work on those. No big deal. Those will come around. I'm going to be looking for a video so I can tune this rear shock. I don't even know what I'm looking for. I want it soft, but I want it to rebound so that I'm sitting upright when I'm just cruising on the trail. So I'm gonna have to see what that means. I have no idea what those little doodads do. I got a little whatever, I don't know, and I pressed it and some air got let out or something the other day. I have no idea. So if anybody knows what that is, you can just send me a link to a YouTube that tells me what they are and how to mess with them. Never had that before. That's fancy to me. And this thing's 20 years old, so that tells you how fancy I've had things. But that's about it for this video. In this video, I've probably said a bunch of things that were wrong because I was just rambling, and I'm trying to get used to this, talking while on camera stuff. We're gonna try to prove on that here in the future. And if you guys have any other ideas for improving this, other than some of the stuff I may have mentioned, basically I'm going to do carburation, gearing, eventually tires. Right now these are holding air and they work fine, so I'm just going to shop around for some cheap knobs that I can put on there and send it. Yeah, I mean, everything else, like the suspension itself, the shocks seem fine. Those don't seem like they need any help, but I'm also used to really, really bad suspension, so what do I know? But hey, if you like this video or like what I did with this thing, get ready for more, because I tend to do some weird stuff. My friends have all told me I need to do a channel. Now, I didn't do this for the channel. I was probably going to do this anyway, because as soon as I built this guy over here, I said, you know what, this would be great if it was in a bigger chassis. So I found a bigger chassis. All right, so that's it for the CRF450R pit bike. I really had fun building it. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull it off. So far, so good. There will be updates, there will be upgrades. Those might end up being shorts. Those might end up being another video or a short video. I don't know how all this works. We're gonna see what I can come up with. But for the time being, keep on building, keep on having fun, and we'll see you at Mini Mayhem 2025. Keep running, riding, and driving.